Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. This is a beautiful fall night, and I am so glad that you are here joining us. You will not be disappointed. We had a great conversation at noon, and we're back, and I'm so glad you could be here. What we always say is our ask of you is to please share this resource broadly with family and friends next door or across the country. We thank all the sponsors that make this possible. We couldn't do it without them. We couldn't do it without you. If you're a social media person, please like, share, find us, and be sure to check out our Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel, where you will be able to find this program going forward as well. So tonight, the format is we will hear from Rick Clark, talking about his very important book, and you don't want to miss that. That will take 1 hour. Following his remarks, we'll be talking with Matthew Pietrafetta, who is with Academic Approach. It is a company that Glenbard provides their juniors, the free resource of these study and preparation for college testing. So you will learn all about all of the changes with SAT. So if that is of interest to you, please stick around at 8 o'clock. We'll talk for about another 25 minutes. Before we get to introducing, I want to quickly tell you about upcoming programs. So this is a busy week. And speaking of busy week, Yale Schoenbrunn will be with us Thursday. Work, Parent, Thrive. How to ditch guilt, manage overwhelm when everything feels like too much. She'll be with us this Thursday, the 5th at noon and at 7 p.m. And then next week, we have never hosted Dr. Bruce Perry before. He and Oprah Winfrey wrote a book together, What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing, a shift from what is wrong with you. I know you will want to circle your calendar and spread the word on that particular program. It is Suicide Awareness Month, and we are bringing in an expert, Dr. Samir Hinduja. He'll be talking on the topic confronting cyberbullying, careless, unwise social media use in tech-savvy kids. That is Wednesday, the 18th at noon and at 7 p.m. In November, we'll bring Sasha Long talking about executive functioning, can't do or won't do to solve behavior challenges. So again, circle your calendar, go to the website to learn more. Rebecca Salaver is the Assistant Director of Technology and Teaching Curriculum and Pathways for the Glenbard Schools. I'm honored to introduce her so that she can introduce our special guests. So Rebecca, take it away.
Joining us tonight is Rick Clark, the AVP of Enrollment Management and Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Georgia Tech. In his role, he directs the Institute's recruitment and enrollment efforts, manages the review and selection of all undergraduate applications, and leads the admission team. Under his leadership, the Institute has dramatically increased brand awareness, improved overall academic class profile, and exceeded strategic goals. Rick has served on regional and national councils and boards. He is currently a member of NACYAC's Committee on Leadership and College Admissions and past chair of both National Government Relations Committee and Georgia Tech Staff Council. Rick travels annually to the U.S. embassies through the Department of State to discuss the admission process and landscape of higher education. He is part of the Leadership Georgia, an organization that seeks to cultivate and connect leaders across the state. And also tonight, we have Matthew Pietrafetta, who founded Academic Approach in 2001 and currently serves as their Chief Executive Officer. Since then, Matthew has supervised the organization's instructional services, curriculum, and technology development. In his work to prepare New York City high school students for college entrance exams, Matthew worked to define a model of test preparation based less on strategy and more on skill development. Academic Approach views test preparation as a means to an academic end, teaching vital college readiness skills that not only raise scores, but also prepare students for academic success beyond the test.
All right, great. Well, looking forward to the conversation. Let me make sure that you are seeing my slides. Matt, can you see those?
Yes, perfect. Yeah. We can.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, thanks so much for taking some time out of your evening. I hope people are getting a chance to have something to eat or relax a little bit. I promise that during the course of this presentation, I'm not going to disrupt you too much. I am going to ask for a couple interactive opportunities though to keep you on your toes a little bit, and we'll be checking chat for that. So, first and foremost, I put together about 1,083 slides here, and just plan to take about 3 hours and 15 minutes. So hopefully, everybody's comfortable and settling in. No, we will absolutely be done for Matt to present at 8 o'clock. So again, Rick Clark, AVP at Georgia Tech, also the co-author of a book that we just recently published along with a friend and a colleague, Brendan Barnard, who works for Sal Khan out in Silicon Valley. Brennan is a high school counselor, and we wrote this book because from both sides of the desk, Brennan working with high school students, talking to them about applying to colleges and some of the work that happens with families there. And then, of course, on the admission side for me, trying to just talk through some of the things we've observed over the last 20 plus years. So many changes, but so many opportunities also, especially for families. And so, that's really what I wanted to kind of talk through tonight, and looking forward to taking questions at the end. So this is where I would love to get some of your answers in chat. I want to play a little word association game for parents, especially who have gone to college already and just thinking back on your college experience. If you would put into chat for me some of the first thoughts that come to mind as you think about the word college, your college experience. What does that connote for you? So looking back on college, what words come to mind? Throw those in chat, and let's just kind of see where we are tonight on people's views in general. And I will keep my eye out here. Parties. All right. Thank you. I like it. Freedom and possibility from Jennifer is awesome. Katie, study, experience, learning. These are great. Very good. Seeing a couple of really positive things here. Independence, independence, independence several times. Fun, long time ago, but independence. Exploration, growth. All right, great. First of all, good to know y'all are out there. Sorry that we are not necessarily IRL, as the kids say here, in the same room and doing this together, but good to know you're with me. And let me just say, I know there's probably a lot of things on your mind tonight, but you are absolutely normal. Scott, understood, broke, probably eating ramen noodles in your dorm room. I get it. I am actually at Georgia Tech tonight. I was just mentioning to Gilda that after this, I'm going to talk to a student group, and I fully expect boxes of pizza and Gatorade to be all over the tables in the room where these kids are hanging out. So yes, but really, fond memories, right? Exciting times, big words. And I really think that if I could see you, you would probably have your arms kind of open, right? Exploration, learning, growth. This is like, you can really breathe and get excited when you're saying some of these things. And that is awesome. And that is what people say. As was previously mentioned, I really have the privilege to travel around the world. I've been to South America, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and I've talked to kids in all of those places, and to parents and families in all those places. And this is exactly what they say, right? So if am I normal or am I okay, was on your mind as a worry tonight, take that off and go back to, did you pay that bill, or, is the ankle really twisted, or whatever the other worries were that you brought in today. Moving on, though, and adding one word, I would be curious to know if we'll continue in chat, because we'll add one word and go from college to college admission. And so again, playing word association, what words come to mind? So, you got your old glossy, shiny brochures. Some of you guys are probably starting to see more and more of these showing up in the mailbox, emails coming from colleges. Maybe you've been out to a hotel or to at the high school to hear somebody from college admission talk. So same thing, word association, what comes to mind? So we're going to move on from growth and all this to bam, Emily, and the next one here too, both stress, number one answer on the board, coming from Katie there too, anxiety, overwhelming. I presented to a group of Georgia Tech alumni recently, and I had not heard this one before, but Black Box was out there, and also Hunger Games, which is like, wow, all right, we're in a really dark place now. We've gone from college and excitement and growth and all of the really good stuff to overwhelming stress, inundated. It's like, oh man, now it goes from this to like, oh, getting tight, and feeling a little bit like, what's happening? Are we in control? I'm not sure how to handle this, right? And uncertainty. And so, what I want to say is that tonight we're going to go through 10 different truths. And truth number one is that what I've seen and what we talk about in the book, and we try to talk about on our podcast also, is this idea that college admission can, because I've seen it every year, and should be more like college itself. And really, this is, I think, in many parts, the responsibility and the opportunity that we as parents have. And I say this as a parent of teenagers myself, coaching our kids towards the end, and we have to do this a lot with them, right? We have to help them get out of their own way, get out of their own head, kind of clear the clutter a little bit and keep them focused on, what's the big picture and where is this all going? And it's going to the things you all said: growth, learning, opportunity, etc. College admission can be that. And for families, sometimes this can feel stressful. It can be consuming, right? And for parents especially, it's tough because it connects to things that we love or need or feel very certain ways, and sometimes worry about at the same time, which is our kids and our money, right? And college admission can come right at the very intersection of those two things, kids and money. And we want the best for our kids. We know we can't fully control things, and we can fall into this trap too. But if you do it well, and we're going to talk through that tonight, I actually think it's an opportunity to listen, to actually grow closer as a family, to make some discoveries, like we saw, what we said earlier about being, kind of a good college student and keeping that end in mind of where this is all going. And I think that parents often, on the panels that I'm on and the presentations I give, inevitably you get that question, I'm just uncertain of what my role should be. How can I be a good parent in the college admission process? And I do think that helping stay focused on where this is going and thinking more like a college student and keeping them focused on that is really, really key. Some of you may already know this, but this happens to be a picture of Minneapolis. All right. And you probably know this. I was unaware. Again, I've traveled all over the country, traveled over the world, had never been to Minneapolis until about 5 years ago. And in my defense, I flew in, it was dark. I got to the hotel, got up early before the meetings the next day, and went to the lobby, and I asked, hey, is there a good run around here? Maybe 4 or 6 miles. I'd love to get a run in. And she says, oh yeah, you're going to love it. There's a run that goes across 3 bridges, across the river 3 times. And I said, which river is that? And she looked at me like I had 3 heads and said, with a lot of, I would say, judgment in her eyes and in her voice, the Mississippi, which was super embarrassing. And I basically just put my hand on my head, ran out of there, did the beautiful run. But it showed me that, well, I know a lot about our country. I know I've swam in the Mississippi many thousand miles south of that. I know a good bit about geography and feel like I'm a pretty educated person. We all have our blind spots. We all have the things that we don't know, and we all can benefit from kind of zooming out and rethinking things, right? And that's why I want to do here as we talk about college admission and the landscape of college admission. So hopefully you've not already cheated. Hopefully you have not already, gone to the internet to get this right, because I want to be clear, I have no prizes for you. But ballpark for us here in chat, how many colleges or universities are there in the United States? So love to see some of your guesses here, or maybe through your research, what you already know to be the case. All right, great. So CD at 4,500, 500 maybe. Kate is good guess. Let's see what else that we have. Couple, pretty big range. Like, how many colleges are there in this one small country of ours, right? Lots of Americans going abroad, lots of people from abroad coming to the United States. 10,000 is another guess that's out there. So we've got a gamut, let's say. And so the answer is about 4,000. And about 3,000 of those are four-year colleges and universities. This is our big number for American higher education. Two-year schools, four-year schools, privates, publics, community colleges, for-profit, all of that included in this number, right? And so the big take home here is lots of choices and options, a very vast landscape for our students. How many of those do you think are admitting 25% or less? So Georgia Tech would fall into this category. Last year, we admitted about 17% of students who applied here. So give me some guesses on how many of those schools, let's say of the 3,000 four-year schools, how many do you think were admitting a quarter or fewer? About 100. And that's certainly not what we read. It's not what we hear. It's not what is going to get clicks and sell marketing and drive readership. The truth is that, the average four-year college admit rate is about 65%. So most colleges in America are admitting most of the students who apply. And many of these schools, and many of you probably live in or around the kind of Chicagoland area, lots of great schools, Big Ten schools, and in the Midwest and others. If you go look at their admit rates, not extremely challenging necessarily to get into some of those amazing schools with huge networks and big reaches and national and international brands, but they're doing a phenomenal job educating students, giving them opportunities when they're done. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. Oh no, we can see all the answers on the PowerPoint. It's not showing in slide view. Oh wow, so this is a problem. Well, let me go through then and just thank you. I was informed that this isn't so challenging. All right, so 80% of schools being test optional for four-year colleges and universities. And this is also important, and this has been a real shift and a real change. But if you have a student who is not feeling like they're a great tester and yet a phenomenal student academically and otherwise, there are a lot of choices for them, a lot of ways to apply, a lot of timing to apply, a lot of places to apply. So we're done with the quizzes. We're done with some of that. So we'll move to truth number 2, and that is what we just sort of demonstrated. Getting into college is not the real challenge, right? So what is, and what is college admission kind of all about for your family? And what are my sort of hopes for you as you go through this? One of the things I would say, and one of the challenges that you have is that the press, and even admission people, I mean, when you hear them talk, it is largely saying that college admission is a process. And so right now, let's say you have a sophomore. This is like an orange person. You've got an orange person living in your house. I don't know if you were aware of that before now, but you've got an orange person, might be walking past you right now, might be going up the stairs, might be coming in the driveway. And what they're hearing is that it's a process, and what that means is that the kid down the street got into a school where they want to go, or a school where they think you would like them to go, or a school that plays football on Saturdays and gets a lot of attention and is supposedly a good school. And what I've heard then is I've got to do X plus Y to get to purple. And man, I just want to get purple, right? Like my whole goal is just to ultimately be purple. How do I not make a mistake? I've heard I need to make, I need to take at least 5 AP classes. I have heard I need to make 20 points higher on the SAT. I've heard this or I've heard that. And it's a process. It's a process. There's a recipe. There's a formula. And really that couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is that college admission is designed to be very individual. College admission is not supposed to be the same for every student, nor will it be. And some of the results they're going to see, some of the experiences that they're going to have will vary. And as a parent, I think that's our job, is to really coach them towards asking individual questions, right? About who they are as a learner, who the type of people around them bring out their best. My daughter is extremely flexible. I would say ridiculously flexible. And she's not a big football fan, but we were watching ESPN highlights recently, and she's got like her feet literally somehow behind her head. And every time they would show a highlight and they would, give, which team is playing another, she would ask, is that a good school, right? New Mexico State is playing Rice. Is that a good school? Brown is playing University of California. Is that a good school? Whatever it was, it's like, yes, that is a good school. Every single time she asked, yes, that's a good school. I think the question as parents that we need to move and point our kids to is that a good school for you? And adding that on to the end to say, all right, regardless of what it might be ranked, regardless of their admit rate, regardless of what you've heard, regardless of what it was when I was going through college, is that a good school for you? And I think helping to facilitate conversations that way is really key. This is a picture of my son. Kid is extremely odd, very much like his mother in that regard. This was during family pictures in Piedmont Park in Atlanta. And this kid climbs to the top of a magnolia tree and looks like he's impersonating Rafiki from The Lion King. And, he says, look beyond what you see, right? Many of you will remember this from your Disney days with your younger kids. And what I would say is that that's really our job as parents, is to try to help them look beyond what they're hearing and what they're seeing, because you've watched them on their phone for literally 20 minutes, becomes 40 minutes, becomes 2 hours of tunnel vision on their phone. Who knows what they're taking in, but it's easy to get myopic, right? And this is true as it relates to college admission. They see the same hoodies, they see the same bumper stickers, they hear a lot of the same messages. Helping to zoom out and helping them to really ask better questions around who they are, what they want. Is it a good school for them? And helping them to know that what you want more than anything is not to be able to wear that same hoodie or to put that bumper sticker on the back of your car, but that they are going to find a fit and a match of a place, where they're going to thrive. And I think empowering them in that regard is huge. We all as humans struggle to escape our echo chamber. And I would say that for students, this happens in the hallways of school. This happens on social media. We kind of talked about that before. For parents, it can happen too. And, I call this my sky banner message. Some of you might have thought about this before, but like for the profession that you're in, what is your sky banner message? If you could just say this to everybody about your company, if you could say everything about, your profession, this is what you would fly across the country with one of those sky banners you see at the lake or at the beach. And my sky banner message for you today is that parents of high school students should talk to fewer parents of other high school students about college admission and more parents of current college students and recent college grads. When I talk to parents of current college students, which I do all the time, and recent college grads, which I also do all the time, what they tell me is that, this was a surprise. I didn't think that she was going to end up here. This wasn't necessarily her first choice. This sort of came on her radar late. They'll say things like, he didn't get into his first choice, or we didn't get the scholarship that we wanted to this other school, or whatever. We hear that a lot. And yet, now they're thrilled. It's going great. They're super excited. I'm sure you've had these conversations with coworkers or with relatives or with neighbors who will say these same things. When you talk to parents who have kids in college or recent college grads, what you hear them give you is a lot of peace and solace to say that, no, we did not script this out. We did not control the whole process. But ultimately, it really has turned out to be a good thing. You'll hear this from people who even say, you know what, he started out at this school and he transferred, right? And that also it's a route they never would have predicted, a route they probably didn't, have in their minds, but they've found their way through. And so I think that, trying to talk to other parents of high school students about like the game that's coming up, or, can you believe that, this happened or that happened in the high school, or something about a class, fine and good, right? But when it comes to college admission, we have to escape our echo chamber too. Sometimes that means us getting off of social media where people are putting information out there that's only driving our consternation and our anxiety. Because what I've found is that parents of high school students, other high school students, like they've got just enough information to sound credible, but it's wrong, right? Or they lie, right? All of a sudden, a 1380 becomes a 1480. $5,000 scholarship becomes a full ride. There's a lot of exaggeration and hyperbole that happens sometimes here. So be focused on escaping your echo chamber. Truth number 3, I think, this big concept of what is success? When we talk about keeping the end in mind, college admission success, what is that? What do we really want for our kids? I think if you were to write this down tonight, very few people would say college admission success is, and then the name of one school. College admission success is, and then the name of even 4 schools, right? Most of us would say things like college admission success is helping my student find a place where they will have a faculty member that cares about them, have friends, be successful, set themselves up for jobs. But sometimes our actions and our behaviors point more towards the former than the latter. And so I think that it's important to be reminded that when our kids were 3, when our kids were 5th graders, what we wanted for them and what we want for them when they are 25 and 30 ultimately is that they will have choices and options. And as people, as humans, I think this is what we long for. When we talk about freedom, it means getting to choose and to pick, who we marry and where we live and what job we have and, what we eat and all of these things. We want choices and options. And as a parent, what is your job? What is your role? That question that comes up time and time again. I think that we need to be coaching them towards having choices and options. So here's how you get there. You get there by helping them to not be so myopic, to not be so focused, to look beyond what they see and to say, man, I believe in you. There's a lot of places where you can be happy. There's a lot of good schools for you. And let's go find ones where, we are confident that you will be admitted, a couple where we think it's pretty likely you'll be admitted, and a couple where, all right, we know there's some uncertainty and there's not a lot of predictability about that, right? Too often, I think people get really focused on highly selective schools. And just to go back to how math doesn't work, if you apply to 5 schools that all admit under 20%, that doesn't give you a 100% chance of getting into one of them, right? That's just not statistics. Instead, I think we need to coach our kids towards this idea of 5 first choices, right? And I hear students all the time apply to a school and then they will straight up say, but I wouldn't actually go there. That is preposterous. That would be my sky banner message to students. Why would you ever apply to a school that you wouldn't actually go to? Our job as parents, when there's 4,000 schools out there in this one small country of ours, is to help them find at least 5, right? And probably more, where they will be excited. And another part of the job of parents is when they get in, no matter which school it is, whether it's your first choice, whether it's your alma mater, while it's your alma mater's biggest rival, is to celebrate their wins. When those admission letters come, you take them out to dinner, you buy them something, you celebrate everything that it's taken to get there, right? So that they know that you really believe in this idea that wherever they go, they're going to be successful and that you're 100% with them. Because the odds are, especially right now with what's happening in college admission, in that you're seeing oftentimes lots of students applying to a small number of schools. Admit rates are a little less variable. There is uncertainty because of things like, test optional and some of the shifts that, are sort of occurring from year to year. There will probably be some unexpected speed bumps. There might be some reroutes that occur, preparing students for the fact that they could get deferred. And some of your kids, have never seen a B in their life. They've never been told no in their life. They've gotten everything. They've been an achiever. They've been a striver, right? And when they hear maybe, which is a defer, or maybe, which is a wait list, it can be kind of shocking, right? And so if you get rerouted, if you get denied, if you get waitlisted, if you get deferred, and most students do at some point along the way, if they have a big picture in mind and they know you're with them 100%, that just feels like a reroute. It feels like a delay. It feels like, you know, a little bit of uncertainty, but not a big deal. But if you've kind of coached them towards narrow, or if they haven't been pulled out of one place, one dream school, one top choice, a reroute feels like a dead end. And when we don't want to end up there, and you don't have to end up there. The other thing I would say is right now, especially if you have a senior, and I'm talking to a lot of seniors now, pretty much every day, what you hear them talk about is filling out the application. You know, I want to put my best foot forward. I want to do my best job on the application. What do admission counselors want to see? What do they want to hear? You know, how do I go about doing this? And one way as a parent or a supporting adult around students who are applying that you can help them is to reshift the way they're approaching their application, okay? You can't go back to the 9th grade and make them have like joined the tennis team or, you know, gotten their Eagle Scout or something. But you can change how they approach the application. 17-year-olds look at applications the same way they do sometimes applying for a driver's license or applying for a job. And they look very similar, so I get it, right? An application looks in many ways like a form. They log in, they have to put some biographical information down, they have to check some boxes. It feels very formy, right? It feels very formish. And so they're not crazy for thinking that. But one thing, you know, as someone maybe that's hired people in your company, as someone who's been part of interviews on both sides, is that the way that these are being read, the way that these are being received is very different than the way 17-year-old, you know, and 18-year-old seniors approach them. They say, I got to do this, right? They say, I got to plug this in. Hey, mom, where did you go to college? Make sure they got their address right. They move on from biographical to their testing, to where they go to high school, to what did I do along the way? And it feels like a form. The truth is, the way we read this, and I am literally sitting in my office where earlier today, a committee was meeting to go through norming, right? Where we read applications from the prior year and we talk about making sure everybody's reading in a similar way. We don't read applications like forms. We read applications like stories. And empowering students to look at it this way can de-stress things a little bit, and it will absolutely clarify some key things that kids often have questions about. If they look at it the way we look at it, when we look at it like a story, we open up an application and we see the student's name, how many siblings they have, where they go to high school. We start forming in our mind a picture of this student, right? We look at the classes they've taken, the choices they made. We look at the grades they made. We look at their grade trends. It's a story to us. And the story becomes more and more clear as we go chapter by chapter through. One of the biggest places kids get stressed, and I am sorry if you have one of these kids in your house right now, because I get it, of why this is tough, is when they get to the essay and they think, you will hear this from them. What do they want to hear? And they're trying to get into our heads, right? And I will tell you, my head is a very disturbing place to be. Nobody wants to be there. What do they want to hear? And the truth is that what they want to hear is another chapter, right? What we don't want to hear is what they've already told us. And too many essays double down on what we already know. You will see many essays that are essentially resumes in narrative form. You will see where a student already told us a good bit through their activities of what they've done, and we're just getting that more. If you have a senior right now applying, or if you have a junior who ultimately applies and you hear them ask that very common question, what do they want to hear? What should I write about? I've got 3 things on my mind. What should I write about? The question is, what do they not know? What do you want to make sure they know? What is missing, right? That is what you write about. They wonder sometimes, what's the first activity that I should put down? If they only read one, what is the one you want them to read? Because we read quickly. You know, we will read sometimes 40, 50 applications in a day. And when you're doing that, as you do in your work, I'm sure, and you do in general with news articles and other content that you take in, you read quickly, you skim, right? First lines of essays matter a lot. Last lines of essays matter a lot. The order that you put your activities in, if they're skimming quickly, this will help them tell their story. So convince them that the application is not a form, though it looks like one. It is their story. I think then it sounds like maybe because of my presentation, you can already see this. So I'll just skip right to it. This is what high school students think admission people look like. They think that these are just judges who have like a pipe in one hand and like a red pen in the other. And nothing will bring them more joy than to bust you for like a comma splice, right? And the truth is that most college admission first readers, the people that are really the first ones to touch your file before it moves through the committee process, are in their mid to late 20s, right? They have Instagram accounts. They wear North Face vests. They're normal people, right? And they, like all humans, want your application to be good. They want it to be interesting. They start out every single time in your corner. No logical, reasonable, rational, sane human opens something up, a book, goes to a movie, etc., hoping it's terrible. Nobody does that. Admission counselors don't do that either. If you feel like they are getting stressed, have them go look on admission websites, social media channels, etc., and see some of the people. And if they're worried about their essay, let them see some of the people that are reading this. They'll, put these profiles out on websites. I think it will calm them down. I think it will give them a little bit of solace to say, I just need to tell my story, and now I have a better sense of how to do that. Truth number 5 is just this idea that, there is no magic formula. Basically, people think that I need to do X plus Y to equal Z. I need to take, I've heard, I read, somebody told me that I need this many APs, that I need this particular test score in order to get in. But the truth is that, in Take at Georgia Tech, our first year class is nearly 3,800 students. There's such a wide variety of kids within that class. You have people who have done almost anything you can imagine outside the classroom, and somehow they seem to have done everything that's available outside the classroom. You have other kids who are just super focused on one or two things, right? So it is not, you need this many things, or, you need to have taken these particular classes. Instead, building and shaping a class is this idea that there's going to be diversity, there's going to be variety. And I think helping them to understand, like, when college admission folks are looking at what they've done, and when they're thinking about the things that they're going to be involved with in high school, we're looking for 3 basic things. Have they been involved? Have they had an impact? And have they had an influence on people around them? And on our rubric at Georgia Tech, and one of the things I think admission people are really asking when they look through students, activities and things is, will they be missed when they're gone? Will they be missed by a coach, by a boss, by somebody in the school building? And their job on the application, and as they're moving through their high school career, is to demonstrate that I'm a good student, and I'm somebody who is having an impact on the people around me. Because kids always are saying, and parents too, what are you looking for? What do you want? And if you have a 9th grader or a 10th grader, this is the bottom line take home message, that ultimately what colleges are looking for is good high school students. So if you have a 9th grader or a 10th grader and they're asking, or you're asking, what should we be doing right now for college admission? Absolutely nothing. Be a good high school student is the message to freshmen and sophomores. Go back to class, study, do your homework, be a good citizen in the school, do your things outside the classroom, because good high school students become compelling college applicants, become successful, impactful college students. Ultimately, when we're reviewing applications, we want to know, can the student do the work academically? But we'll move quickly past the numbers, because many students sort of check that box. Now it becomes, like these students I'm about to go talk to right after this here on campus, it's going to be, people in that room, right, who are engaged. They're having a 9:00 p.m. meeting for the Student Government Association because they were like this in high school, right? Good high school students become good college applicants, become successful, impactful college students. And that's the community and the campus they're trying to build. Many schools, we talked about this already, are using only the numbers to make admission decisions. And they'll be very clear about this on their websites. Make these grades, have this test score, you will be admitted. End of story. Sometimes money is even given out that way too, where financial aid is driven by a certain GPA or certain test scores, right? That's certainly true here in the state of Georgia with our lottery funded scholarships. If they apply to a school where holistic admission comes into play, and at Georgia Tech, we used to be formulaic. We admitted 62, 63% of students who applied. Over time, more and more students have applied. And while our class has grown, it hasn't mirrored the demand. And so we have a supply and demand issue, which leads you to add more things in your process. This is why schools ask for essays. This is why schools want to know what you've done outside the classroom. This is why some schools have interviews. And what you will find, and if you've had a daughter perhaps who's been a gymnast, and my daughter is, you know that in this women's all around, it's not about just jumping a bar. It's about style too, right? It's about some human judgment that goes into making sort of very slight delineations. And as a parent, I think the take-home message and what's really important to understand is you're not going to know exactly how that score came to be, right? And there could be variance in one school to the other on how a particular student's application is viewed. And so what we have to kind of focus on is, these are the various things that might be looked at, but there's not going to be as much predictability in those more selective schools. And that's why that balanced list is so important. Ultimately, college admission decisions come down to two things: supply and demand, the number of applications for the number of seats in the class, and mission. And mission drives admission. In other words, what you're trying to accomplish as a school will dictate how you make admission decisions, right? And this is why year in and year out, we will get emails that say, I can't believe that my student was not admitted to Georgia Tech, but was admitted to insert the school they think is better here, right? But that is because like 60% of our students come from the state of Georgia. We're not going to enroll our whole class for computer science. If supply and demand or the type of institution that you're trying to create are dictating these decisions, then that's going to be very different in the way that a decision is made than maybe how it feels to a student who's receiving it. And as a parent, I think that's really our goal. And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to help students understand there's a lot of factors going on. Maybe they added a new major. Maybe they cut a major recently. Maybe they're trying to grow something in particular, like a state. I was out in Colorado recently with a school that was saying, we are trying to enroll more students from Colorado. It will be easier to get in from Colorado than from Pennsylvania, right? Very open and very clear about saying that. These are things you can't control. You can't control where you live. You can't control, what major maybe that you have that particular year when something behind the scenes is going on, because mission is ultimately going to drive admission. And that means that no, college admission is not fair, but it does make sense because schools are different and they look the same on their brochures or on their websites, but they're very different in the number of students they need, in the ethos and the campus culture they're trying to create. And that's why it's about fit and finding at least several top choices for your students. Really, admission decisions are more like the NCAA tournament and not so much like a Excel formula, right? If it was just GPA plus SAT, draw a line, I would not be at work as much, right? I could really enjoy a lot more of my discretionary time. But we go deep into reading these applications in holistic review. And then we try to shape a class, which means just like the World Cup, if you're not a basketball fan, you're a soccer fan, then you can go with the World Cup. You're not going to have an entire World Cup with countries only from Europe or South America. Even if there might be a country from South America or Europe that's better than another school or student or country that gets in, right? And the same thing is true for colleges. They are trying to build a class that is diverse geographically, that's diverse academically, that's leaning into the things they're trying to create as an institution. And as parents, that's our job, is to help students understand we put our best foot forward. We know we have a lot of choices and options when this is done. And there's parts of this that we're not going to be able to control. However, I really believe that you are in control of more than most students think, that they control where they apply, right? They get to pick where they apply, and we're coaching them towards that. They don't control how those decisions are exactly made, but then they end up in March and April of their senior year with options and choices because they were able to do their research, to do their homework, to find schools where it was good for them, and they're going to be excited to go. And when I walk out of this building, I will be right by the Tech Tower, which is our sort of iconic building. And that is where everybody takes drop-off pictures. After they get their kids moved into their dorms, they take pictures there. And I see this year in and year out, semester in and semester out, where mom's crying or dad's crying or everybody's crying, or even the person taking the picture sometimes is crying. And ultimately, where you want to be, the end in mind is that particular arch or monument or statue or building at a college campus somewhere where you know that it's not about that place so much, but how you got there. I really think how you get there is more important than where exactly it is. That you are honest, that you listened, that they know that you are with them, that you love them, and that they're going to be successful, because of that, right? And they control a lot more of this than you think. I think a lot of parents put pressure on themselves when it comes to money to say, I want to be able to write a check or send my kid to the best school they get into, no matter how much it costs. And we beat ourselves up sometimes, or we avoid conversations because, we're hopeful it's just going to work out, right? But I think that the real gift actually is when we have open conversations with our kids early, just like we do about a phone that they wanted or a car that they wanted, or, some other product or item that they've wanted in the past, where we're honest about saying like, no, I'm just not willing to pay for that. Or I'm not able to pay for that, right? That is okay. I think that's actually our job. And I think as juniors or in the summer prior to the senior year, that's what I'm hoping you'll have conversations with. What are your expectations for them? What are the conditions that you have? What are the limitations that you have? And being really clear about that early. I will say I've been in this very room in April before where I'm sitting around the table with a family and they haven't had these conversations. And the kid's sitting there literally wearing a Georgia Tech shirt, and mom is literally blowing her nose into the financial aid letter. And it's super awkward, and I'm unprepared to counsel through that because they did not say, we will pay up to, you name the number, 18,000, 20,000 for the year, but we can't pay any more than that, or we aren't willing to pay any more than that, right? Because we want to keep going on vacations. We don't want to have to, sell our second house. Like that's not selfish. That is reasonable. And I think that it's really important for people to remember open conversations is greater than open checkbooks. I've really come to find, and this is why we wrote the book, this is why we do the podcast, this is why I write the blog, that it is ultimately all about family. I used to think it was about the student. I used to think it was about the testing or the GPA or the deadlines or all the things that we talked about earlier. But I've come to find it's really about family. And so, if your teenager is watching this with you, or if you're going to go talk to them after this, one of the things I hope you'll say to them is, I'm proud of you and I love you, right? And I trust you. And those are key things because they're in a tough spot. I mean, it is not easy being a teenager. My wife and I were saying that today. It's not easy being a high school student. And these are some of the things they're worried about, right? These are some of the things they've told me in presentations and in surveys over the past couple of years. These are the things that they're hoping for, and we are going to be able to share these slides out. But these are some of the things that they're hopeful for when it comes to college, right? They got a lot of things on their mind. These are some of the things they want to be able to say to you that maybe they don't feel like they can, or maybe they try to, but they aren't really able to articulate it. Having empathy and understanding, like they really are trying. They really, do understand this is important. There's some difficulty here for students navigating this, right? These are just, again, some of the things that we've heard over the course of the last couple of years. Some of these are direct quotes. Some of these are kind of conglomerations of what's been said. And look, it's not easy being a parent either, and I get that. You know, and I hope that if a student's watching this with you, they'll tell you thank you, you know, for all of the dishes you've done and the carpools you've driven and the support. And look, as parents, we know we get crazy sometimes. We say things and we hear ourselves saying things coming out of our mouth, and we know that's not the right thing to say, but it comes from a place of love. You know, we love our kids, and that's what I've come to realize is we love our kids. Parents fundamentally want what's best. It's just sometimes we get that mixed up on how to say it or the signs that we're sending. And so I want to just have us keep that in mind. And then, you know, finally, the other thing that I wanted to share is this idea that this is a privilege, right? College is exciting. College is a time of growth. All the things we started with, exploration and learning and big, exciting things. And so especially if you have a senior who's kind of feeling like, I've got to write this essay, I have to make this deadline, I have to retake this test, I have to do this, that, and the other, I hope you'll find ways to let them breathe a little bit and come back to, man, this is exciting. Like college, this is where it's headed. No, we don't know where, but that's kind of part of the adventure of it. And we're in it together, right? We get to do this. And that's so incredibly important. And so that's the 10 truths that I have for you. And I really appreciate you being available tonight and listening in. And I wanted to see, Gilda, if there was anything that we could take some questions on here in our remaining time.
Such excellent information. We really need to separate our own ego. It's not, talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, we talk about, you know, a couple of the wedges that come into place. And I do think that, you know, time, right? Letting this be all consuming, money, right? We talked about how money can be kind of a wedge. And then another big one is ego, right? And as parents, sometimes we feel like where my kid gets in is like a referendum. It's like a final report card on my parenting. And you know, if I can just post that my kid's going to X, whether it be my alma mater or some really prestigious place, like it'll demonstrate, you know, that I did a good job here. And, you know, it's easy to get some ego there. It's also easy to get ego. This is back to perspective. Sometimes it's easy for us to look back on when we were in high school or when we were in college and have a stereotype of a college of what it was. And some pride or ego or, you know, maybe not giving the full credence to the fact that these places are different now. They've changed a lot over time. And so in that regard, checking ourselves too and being like level set on, let me keep an open mind here and model that for my kid.
Yeah. There's a question here. How has ChatGPT changed your decisions?
Changed our decisions? Well, I guess, okay, so with ChatGPT, what we're saying to students is we think that using ChatGPT for writing essays and even working on the activities section of the Common Application can actually be a really good tool. It is not a throw something in, copy and paste it and submit. I did a letter of recommendation recently for one of my employees who's applying for a, you know, kind of a prestigious award. And I started with taking some of his resume and building some of the things in and using ChatGPT to get started on his letter of recommendation. Super helpful. In the end, I took that and I made it my own, but it probably cut my time in half of what it would normally take me to write a recommendation. I think this is true for students with essays. I don't want them to feel like this is a burden and a gauntlet. If they can throw some ideas out and sort of brainstorm and iterate, then that can be really helpful. But with ChatGPT and AI, you know, I think that the students can use this as, you know, really a modeling tool for themselves. And maybe they have 3 ideas of an essay and they throw all 3 in to see, you know, kind of what resonates and where they want to then make it their own. That is what writing's all about, iterating, you know?
You stated 5 first choice schools. Can you recommend how many backup schools to apply to as well?
Yeah, so I think that it is wise for for students and families to focus on somewhere between say 7 and 11 total schools. I think once you start going past 11, you start to wonder why do we need to add that? Would I really go there? Would I be super excited? And why don't I have already sort of my bases covered? But generally speaking, I think if we can find, let's say, 2 to maybe 3 where it is looking extremely certain that we will be able to be admitted to that school. Another couple in the middle there where, all right, based on the SAT averages, or maybe my school has Naviance or SCORE where it shows historical data, there's a pretty good chance. And then maybe a couple where it's like, I understand this is unpredictable, right? And that's going to be a place where it would be awesome if it works out, but there's no guarantee. I think that gets you into that range of 7 to 11. Oh, you were on, I'm sorry, you went on mute there for a second.
What's the question you get asked most often?
Huh. Oh, that's a good one. I mean, we get asked about the essay a lot. We get asked about the essay a lot. What do you want to hear? What should I write about? The other one that we get a lot, and I don't know, this is a little bit in the weeds, but this sort of AP classes versus dual enrollment classes, right? Which one is better? Is it better to take an AP English or go to the local college or do an online, class? And what we say to that, I would say, is like, what's your goal, right? Are you trying to just get college credit? Or, which of those is going to prepare you the best, do you think, for college when you ultimately go? But that one we get a lot.
There's a question here about test scores. We talked about this a little bit, about how when they say test optional, it truly is test optional. This is not a gotcha moment, so believe that, right?
That's right.
Okay.
I think the way to approach this, I'd be curious to hear what Matt might say later on this too, but I like metaphors. I use metaphors a lot. And I think test optional to me is like legs of a stool, a table that's sitting with legs. And basically, if you feel like you're testing to that particular school is a leg that you want to bear weight, if your application's sitting on top of that, then that's a school where you want to send your test to. Maybe there's somewhere else where you're like, I want the rest of it to bear weight. I want them to look more at my grades or more at my classes or more at my activities outside the classroom. Then that could be a place to go test optional, right? And this is what's hard for students is they have to think individually about each school and whether or not they need to send or want to send the test. But I do think that's a helpful way to kind of think through it.
Question about weighted GPA. Is that looked on? Do we need to look at regular GPA as well?
Great question to ask the individual schools where you're going to apply, because you will hear a very wide variety of answers to that question. At Georgia Tech, as an example, when a school provides us both, we look at both, right? Other schools are going to say, we only care about your core academic classes, or we only care about your, unweighted GPA, or don't worry about it because we're going to recalculate in our own way. But this is a great question to ask the individual schools, and you're going to hear a variety there for sure.
This afternoon we talked about how there are a couple of good programs to listen to on the YouTube channel, a good one on financial aid, one about toxic achievement. We also mentioned this afternoon how this should not be a conversation for every meal, every day, 24 hours a day. And I asked you this before, I'm asking you again. I meet my neighbor in the grapefruit fruit section of the grocery store. What's a good response when they go, so where's Susie? Where's Johnny going to college?
Yeah.
What do I say? What should I say?
I think this is where, you referenced earlier this idea of, family meetings or like weekly meetings. And I do think that, coming into that junior spring and getting ready for the senior year, like going ahead and establishing a time, right? And it's going to vary. Maybe it's like 3 to 4 on Sundays, or, Tuesday nights from 7 to 8, where we're not going to bother you the rest of the week, but we're going to sit down at that time and we are going to be able to ask our questions. We are going to be able to look over things, right? And have this conversation. One of the conversations you can have in those meetings is going ahead and establishing some ground rules around exactly what you were just referring to. When is it okay? And to what extent is it okay? And with whom is it okay that I share some of these things? Because you don't want to just be caught in the grapefruit aisle. You want to know whenever you have that brought up that I'm building trust here, right? With my son or daughter, with my high school student, I am building trust. And they have said they don't want me putting this on social media. They don't want me saying until they have decided where they're going, anything, or it's only okay to talk to relatives about it, or, you know, whatever. But being proactive to initiate that is going to really, I think, bring the family closer. And that's where those wedges come in, is when you see trust sort of erode by those type of moments. You're
reminding me you can really model for that neighbor that what trust looks like. You know, Susie has really asked me we're not going to talk about this. We're going to keep this close to the chest. We're just going to be a little more private about it. That's good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, you know, some of that's up to the kid, or sometimes that's up to the parent to say, hey, you know, let's just keep this. We got so many things we share. We got so many things that are public. Like, let's just keep this with our family until we're all excited to do that together, you know? Oh, you went back on mute. Sorry.
So many people acknowledging how beneficial this has been. Your words have really made a difference about the balance, being an advocate, believer of students, really guiding them. So grateful. And now everyone is welcome to listen for another extended workshop. We'll be talking about the SAT test and what parents need to know. So stick around, and we thank you always. You know what we say when we end, and some people will have to get off, we always say, let's go hug the kids. So you're either going to hug the kids now, hopefully, or in another 20 minutes. So thank you, Rick Clark. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Okay, Matt, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. As a father of 3 and an educator who's worked with high school students applying to college for 25 years, I just love Rick's positive perspective, his personalized approach to each child, how family oriented he is. And, you know, I'd like to pick up on that theme and talk about how, if standardized testing is part of your students, you know, college admissions experience, I won't use the word process after Rick's lecture, because that's too mechanical, but if it's part of their experience, how can we approach it in a positive way? And how can we make it personalized to the individual student? So tonight I'll be working from a resource. It's a free ebook available to you all called Understanding College Entrance Exams. I'll be pulling some slides from it. If you want to download the whole document, it's got everything and more that you ever wanted to know about the ACT and SAT. It's available to you at academicapproach.com/GPS. You can use the QR code if you like. I'll put it up again at the end of the presentation. What I'd like to cover briefly in about the next 20 minutes is I'd like to dispel a few myths around standardized testing, and then talk about how to take a positive approach to standardized testing. And that really involves 3 key values: being efficient, insightful, and growth-oriented. Efficiency comes in often deciding one test over the other, you know, so to ACT or to SAT. Colleges and universities, if they want a standardized test, will accept either or. So it's really about what features your individual student best, and there's a way to figure that out. And then when undergoing the process to kind of minimize the stress and to make it educationally enriching, can we use the process to be insightful, to shed light on what students need to learn and what skills they can develop so that they can develop their college readiness as well as raise their scores? And that's really a growth-oriented mindset, not being too sensitive about it or too static-minded. If you get a practice test score back, a PSAT back, and it's not exactly what you wanted it to be, can we take a growth-oriented view, a curious view? Well, what could I work on? Does this tell me something about myself as a student, maybe a category, a skill area like grammar or math that I need to develop that will help me not only on the test, but also in the classroom? And then I'll end with a little note about academic approach. So in terms of myths and facts, let me start with this one. True or false, if you apply to East Coast schools, you must take the SAT because the SAT is required. I thought that when I was growing up in Boston years ago, but it's no longer the case. Any college or university that's interested in a standardized testing score or will look at it will accept either the SAT or ACT. There's no bias, no regionalism. It's your choice. So why is this important? It's important because just because a neighbor's child did well in the ACT doesn't mean that yours will. They might be more of an SAT student or vice versa, an older sibling or a cousin and so forth. So you really want to personalize the decision because it is a choice and that can be empowering for students to make. So how do we make an efficient choice on whether to ACT or SAT? Well, the landscape has changed. For class of 2025, the SAT is getting a major overhaul. And I've been through over my many years in test prep, 3 of these major overhauls, 2005, 2016, and now again in 2023. The SAT is changing and becoming a digital multi-stage adaptive test. And that's happening with the PSAT for 11th graders. That is coming up soon. And then in the spring SAT that all Illinois public school students take, that's going to be this new digital multi-stage adaptive test, which I'll talk about a bit. Now, but what does it mean? Is it the experience of the ACT and the SAT, which was always a little bit different in certain specific ways, is becoming very different. So it's really important to kind of assess how does your student fare on either of the 2 tests, and is there a preference? Is there a leader, one that features a student better and that the student enjoys more? Here are the big differences. The ACT is 215 questions, 4 sections, pencil and paper, goes English, math, reading, and science. The SAT is now going to be digital, all online and adaptive. It's got reading and writing modules, 2 of them, and math modules, 2 of them. So at the highest level, paper and pencil ACT, that's preferable for some students. Digital, online, that's preferable for some students for the SAT. A science section on the ACT, well, that's a difference because there isn't one on the SAT. So there are some structural differences and some test-taking experiences can really impact students differently. Let's drill in a little bit more. So what is a multi-stage adaptive test? Basically, it starts out with 1 module. So it's not adaptive item by item like the GRE or the GMAT for graduate school is. Every student takes the same module, 1, and then if you hit a certain cut score of a certain number right or wrong, you either track up towards a more difficult module 2 or down towards a less difficult module 2. And that's true for both the reading and writing and the math. So the reading and writing starts with 1 module, mixes together reading and writing skills. If you hit a certain cut score, your module 2 is harder or it is easier. Then you have a break, then there's the math. Everyone starts with the same module 1 and then the same cut principle, up or down to harder or easier. So that's multi-stage adaptive. It's a very different experience. And as we're administering these tests to students, ACT and SAT, they're having strong preferences one way or another. And you can see why. The structure is very, very different. So here's ACT versus SAT. There's SAT, you have your reading and writing module 1, and then you go to module 2 reading and writing, then a break, then a math module 1, and math module 2. And then the ACT, a much longer test, as you can see, has an English section, a math section, a reading, and a science section. So the SAT has become significantly shorter. So we're talking about versus ACT, 215 ACT questions and 98 SAT questions. So what you try to do is administer practice tests to make an informed decision, and then you can put your scores on a concordance table. 1600 is the highest score on the SAT, 36 on the ACT, and see where you fare. I'll talk more about this, but this is a great first step to take to individualize or personalize the choice of if your child is going to spend some time on test preparation. Does one test feature the child better? So just to move through quickly a section by section view of how these tests differ. And this can really impact students in very discrepant ways. So the ACT and the SAT both have reading sections, but they're very different reading sections. So ACT has 4 passages, each about 900 words with 10 questions each for 40 questions. And the SAT doesn't have long passages anymore. It has a few sentences and then questions on those few sentences, and then you switch to another short passage of a few sentences and a question on that. So one little passage, one question, one little passage, one question. You have more time per question on the SAT, so it's a slower test, and you have fewer questions. But there's a difference in the material. So here's an ACT passage, nice long passage, and then you get 10 questions on it, really testing main idea and specific detail comprehension. The SAT has these shorter passages, just a few sentences and a specific question on each. However, those passages are a little bit more complex. You'll notice the second one here is from George Eliot's Middlemarch, a really complex. I did my PhD in 19th century literature years ago. This is a really hard novel. Long sentences, really complex vocabulary. Eliot was a sophisticated writer. So you're reading shorter things and you have more time for them, but they're a little bit more complex. So here's another example of that. On the ACT, they'll ask you a question based on facts in the passage. So this is about automobiles in San Francisco in 1903. The question asks you that. In the passage, if you go back, it'll mention 1903. It will say something about automobiles. In this case, it says they're perceived as a civic menace. In the correct answer choice, there'll be a synonym pretty close to what they said in the passage, or verbatim, exactly what they said in the passage. In this case, public nuisance, which is the same as civic menace, more or less. And so all the answers are in the passage and they're pretty explicitly stated. The SAT is going to get a little bit more sophisticated than that. Here's an example of, that comes from a poem. You won't get any poems on the ACT, but you will on the SAT, where they ask you to find the lines in the poem that prove a certain claim best. So now you're going through multiple lines and you're thinking what evidence suits the claim best. It's still evidence-based reasoning, which is what both tests test, which is slightly more complicated. You would never really choose between the two tests based on ACT English versus SAT writing, because although the construct is different and there's more questions on the ACT and it's a little bit faster, and SAT is a little slower with fewer questions, the content's pretty much the same. It's testing really good proofreading and copy editing skills that students should have in high school and definitely need to be college-ready writers, like how to correct run-on sentences, sentence fragments, how to use commas and semicolons correctly. And they underline portions of a paragraph and they give you options for revision, 4 of them. Here's the SAT. It's basically the same thing. So for both tests, often students benefit from a review of grammar rules, a core curriculum of grammar. Really helps them on the test, but most certainly makes them better writers and makes them more college ready. So you wouldn't choose based on the grammar sections, but you might choose based on the math. So the ACT math has 60 questions in 60 minutes. That's a minute per question. The SAT math has 44 questions in 70 minutes. So you have 1.58 minutes per question. It's much slower and fewer questions. So that can impact students quite differently. And the tests have become a little bit more similar because you can use calculator now on both. It used to be the SAT didn't allow a calculator on one of its sections. So SAT a little bit slower, fewer questions. That could be a benefit for some students. But once again, the ACT is pretty transparent. Like if they ask you a question about geometry, they might even give you the formula as they do in question 41. The SAT is going to become a little bit more complex as it is in the reading. And they're going to give you questions like this, where there is no multiple choice. And you have to read in your answer and you can't check it against the multiple choice. So the SAT, shorter, less fast, but some more complexity than the ACT. Biggest difference of all, the ACT has a science reasoning section. The SAT does not. What is this section? It's basically tables, graphs, and charts, experimental data, and they just ask you questions, relating to those findings, those experimental results, to go use the graphs and the tables and the charts to draw conclusions. If a student's comfortable with statistics, comfortable in science class, and with reading and reasoning, with experimental results, this is a comfortable section. If not, then not. So this can be a decisive factor because of the differences that the ACT has a science section and the SAT does not. So just with that brief overview, you can see there's some substantial differences in timing, presentation, content, science, no science. It can be enough to help students, if you're listening now, or parents, if you're self-reflecting, remembering the student that you were, to say, oh yeah, obviously I would prefer this to that. But what we like to do is drill in further to help support you in making that decision, encourage you all, whether it's with us or someone else, to take some time to gather some insights, and really learn about what the testing results are saying about learning needs as you make a decision about which test to prepare for and how to prepare. So I'm going to get to another myth that's really important here, and I think really important for parent mindset to understand. The myth is that a student's test scores will always correlate perfectly well to the student's GPA. So I'm a good student in school, so I should just get equally good standardized testing scores, or vice versa. And that's not always true for two main reasons. One, the tests are summative of many years of academic material. They test 7th through 11th grade topics. It's really quite possible your student, when they sit down and take one of these tests, has forgotten some of that material. That doesn't mean they're not super smart or capable. Doesn't mean they can't relearn it, but they forgot it. So the reason why I put this out there is in the spirit of what Rick was saying, is in terms of empowering the family to be supportive and to personalize the process or the experience for your students. It's really important when those scores come back, a PSAT, a practice test, not to panic, not to be too static-minded, but ask curious questions. Well, is it more that you've just forgotten some things, or you haven't taken geometry in a few years, and we just need to spiral it back? If you drill down further into our section called Personal Pathways of Learning, we talk a lot about choosing which test is right for you and how to use data to do it. And so, as I mentioned already, one layer of this is take a practice SAT and ACT and put them on the comparison table. And in this case, you can see this student is several rungs higher on the ACT. So quantitatively, that may be more favorable. And then you want to drill down further into a score report. This is an example of one of our score reports for ACT English, where we tag every item to the rules that are being assessed. And if you drill in, this can give real great insights into how to specifically prepare for the individual student. So here, in a category called sentence construction, it's tested 10 times out of the 75 questions on ACT English. It's always tested with great frequency. It covers fragments, run-ons, and misplaced modifiers. 3 really important grammar rules or errors to avoid and rules to understand. And this student got 3 out of 10 right, meaning that 7 points are available just from mastering one area of English grammar that is really helpful for performance on the test, obviously, but also to be an effective editor of your own writing. So you want to drill in and start to look at this data, and you don't want to just stop at the top level score, because it doesn't tell the full story. Averages lie. And so here are 2 students, each of whom have has a 26 composite on the ACT, but they're very, very different 26s. One has a 32 in English, one has a 20 in English, one has a 20 in math, the other has a 32 in math. But you average them up and they get a composite 26, which really doesn't tell the story unless you drill in and try to make sense of it. And that process can allow, or going through that experience can allow you to personalize the decision for your student and really learn a lot about which test would favor them better and what to do specifically in preparing for that test. So we go through a kind of comparison process of, do you like this about the ACT, that about the SAT, and you kind of add up the points and you see which one is the winner. And if you can involve the student in the decision-making process, then they can feel empowered that they made a choice that is theirs. And then when they do dive into preparing for something, it was thoughtful, they chose the right test, they owned it, and they feel more empowered in the decision. So I'll move on briefly before we wrap up, maybe another 5 minutes, just talking about the last key value. So we want to be efficient. We want to use the process to be insightful, to learn about the student, and we want to be growth-minded. We don't want to be static-minded. That is, that practice test score comes back and we sort of get deflated. No, get curious. What can we learn about this, and how can we grow from it? So back to the second portion of the myth. So why doesn't the GPA correlate to the standardized testing scores? Well, I said on one level, students might have forgotten things from 7th, 8th grade. That's not a big deal. Just spiral it back and remember it. The second is that the tests do often present academic material in unfamiliar ways. And getting over that, getting acclimated to how the tests present the material can go a long way in helping students feel confident and succeed. And I'll just give you a quick example of this. So I'm going to show you 3 English items from an ACT English section that we've administered to thousands of students, and we've aggregated their performance data, their accuracy. So they're all testing the same thing, which is sentence construction, which is how to coordinate independent and dependent clauses and so forth, avoid run-ons and fragments. Really important grammar stuff. English teachers love it, and I'm a grammar nerd, so I love it too. But the test is very much concerned with it because it's important to know it to be an effective writer in high school and college. So here are 3 items. Here's the first one. It holds the world's record for the underwater dash, comma. It's probably as wary of your unfamiliar size, shape, and smell as you are of its speed. They're talking about barracudas. And this is the classic comma splice run-on. The comma is connecting 2 independent clauses, which it doesn't have the power to do. The correct answer, the only one that could fix it, is J, because a comma plus a but, which is a coordinating conjunction, some students know it as fanboys, the B in fanboys, has the power to do this. So of all the students who tested, 60% of this got it right, 60% of the students got it right. Same test, same students. A little further on, here's another item. Though engineering projects have shrunk the Platte and thus have in reality drastically reduced the crane's habitat, comma, each year they return messengers of spring in a land just emerging from the bitter winter. So this is a comma connecting for 68 habitat in each. This is a perfect use of a comma. The first clause is dependent, starting with though, making a dependent clause. The second, each year they return, is an independent clause. Commas do that. They connect independent to dependent clauses. It's just fine. G, semicolon, has one little only job that it does for the most part on this test, which is connect to independent clauses. These are not independent clauses, so you can't use a semicolon. Period does the same, and a comma and, another fanboy's word, comma coordinating conjunction does the same. So if you know a little bit about grammar, G, H, and J are all the same basically, so they're all wrong. But this cohort of students just dropped from 60% to 24%. And why? Perhaps they hadn't really seen a semicolon before. It's a very quick lesson to learn it. It's really empowering to them as writers to be able to use it and integrate it into their writing. But it doesn't mean they're not good at English. It just means that, or they can't be great at this section. It just means that this cohort of students hadn't really been exposed to the semicolon as well as they were to the other scenario of sentence construction. And then last and least in terms of accuracy, this item, also same student, same test, same area of skill, sentence construction. Beverly Harvard Dash, chief of police in Atlanta and the first African-American woman to lead a major city's police department, Dash, began her career in law enforcement in an unusual way, colon, to answer a question made by her husband. That is the perfect use of a colon. You have an independent clause to the left. It raises a question. The phrase or clause to the right answers the question. A is correct. Semicolon can't do that in B because to the right is not an independent clause, and the others don't make a lot of sense either. But this cohort dropped from 60 to 24 to 17 because in all likelihood they hadn't really been exposed to what a colon is and how to use it. So I point this out to say that when you see the scores come back, it could mean 2 things. And let's try to be growth-minded about it. Maybe they just have to review some old stuff they once knew in 8th grade. Or there may be a couple of things they haven't been exposed to yet, but they can be taught, can be learned, and they can gain command of. So it's a simple formula in my mind. If students identify specific skills in need of mastery, master those skills to the right level of rigor, it leads to higher academic performance in the classroom and on a standardized test. They're very much the same. So to wrap up, taking a positive approach to standardized testing, and undoubtedly it can be overwhelming. PSAT, ACT, SAT, oh my, and a lot of the stress around it, a lot of, as Rick was saying, the comparisons and the sharing of scores, and perhaps not always friends or families being truthful about how they're doing. It's a stressful context. However, there's a way to approach it positively, and that is to try to be efficient. See if you can pick a better pathway. The SAT or ACT doesn't have to be both. Could be either or, and let's make sure the match is right for the student. Try to use the process to be insightful because the data will shed light on skills that are not just important to the standardized tests, but that just make students better academic students in the classroom, in high school, and in college. And then try to be as growth-oriented and growth-minded about it, not static-minded, but thinking, okay, well, where's the opportunity in here? Can you grow? How do you grow? And like in other things in life, your sports, your theater, your music, your academics in the classroom, you've worked and practiced and you get better. It's the same thing here. Let's be growth-minded. With that, just a final couple notes about academic approach. Founded it in Chicago in 2001. We've been working with your school district for many years and are proud to do so. Lots of experience with the ACT and SAT and really glad to collaborate with families in a complementary process, which is described on the academicapproach.com /GPS page, to do testing and free consultations to guide families. 3 phrases characterize our work: tests are standardized, students are not, so let's personalize. Let's try to build skills that go beyond the test, so that's skills-based test preparation, we call it teaching beyond the test. Feeding 2 birds with 1 seed, grow a score, but also grow skills that last with the student throughout college and life. So next steps, we're happy to help you administer practice tests, provide you complimentary consultations, do that quantitative, qualitative analysis, and help you pick a test and see which is more favorable. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to academicapproach.com /GPS. Thanks for your time. I know it's awfully late, but we're happy to share any information with you that empowers you as a family to make effective decisions with your children.
You're always so generous with your time. I so appreciate it, and so thorough. Appreciate all of your experience. You've given us lots of great information all day today, and we're so grateful. Those Glenbard families, be aware that look for the information about when that free testing resource tips will be available to your child. And we will see you again, I know, in the future, Matthew. We're always so grateful to chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great evening, everybody. Take care. Now we'll go hug the kids. Take care. Bye-bye.